I've been happily married for 2 years, but just discovered through a DNA test that my spouse and I are distant cousins. I never thought a simple birthday gift would turn my world upside down, but that's exactly what happened when my wife, Elena, surprised me with one of those popular DNA testing kits for my 31st birthday. Let's discover your ancestry, she had said excitedly, her eyes bright with curiosity. I remember smiling at her enthusiasm. Elena had done her own test a few months earlier and had been fascinated by the results, discovering a surprising amount of Scandinavian heritage she'd known nothing about. We'd been married for just over 2 years, settling into that comfortable rhythm that follows the initial whirlwind of dating, engagement, and a wedding. Our relationship had always felt special, different somehow from others I'd witnessed or experienced. We understood each other in ways that seemed almost preternatural, finishing each other's sentences and knowing what the other needed without having to ask. Soulmates, her mother had called us, and while I'd always rolled my eyes at such romantic notions, there was something about Elena that had felt like coming home from the moment we met. The DNA test sat on our bathroom counter for nearly 2 weeks before I finally spit into the tube one Sunday morning. I wasn't particularly excited about it, to be honest. I already knew my background was primarily Eastern European on my father's side and Irish on my mother's. Nothing exotic, nothing mysterious, just the standard American melting pot ancestry. But Elena kept asking if I'd done it yet, so I finally gave in, sealed up the sample, and sent it off without much thought. 6 weeks later, an email notification pinged on my phone. Your DNA results are in. I was at work, busy with a deadline, so I ignored it until that evening when Elena reminded me. We sat on the couch together, her curled up next to me, as I logged into the website on my laptop. I clicked through the ethnic breakdown first. No surprises there. 47% Eastern European, primarily Polish and Ukrainian regions. 42% Irish and Scottish. About 10% broadly Northwestern European, and 1% unassigned. That's basically what I expected, I told Elena, who seemed more interested in the results than I was. Check the relatives section, she urged. That's the most interesting part. The site had matched me with hundreds of distant relatives, fourth, fifth, sixth cousins, scattered across the globe. People who shared tiny fractions of DNA with me, most of whom I would never meet or know. I scrolled through the list absently, not recognizing any names, unsure what I was supposed to be looking for. Then I saw it. Elena Novak. Elena Marie 1989. 3.7% DNA shared. Estimated relationship, second to third cousin. My wife's name. My wife's username. My wife was on my DNA relatives list. I blinked, thinking it must be a mistake. Maybe she had somehow linked our accounts when she bought the test. Maybe it was showing me her results by accident? But no, the percentage of shared DNA was right there. 3.7%. Enough to make us related, but distant enough that we wouldn't necessarily know it. I felt Elena shift beside me, leaning in to see what had caught my attention. Her sharp intake of breath told me she'd seen it too. That's weird, she said slowly, her voice tight. There must be some kind of error. I clicked on the match, opening the comparison screen that showed exactly which segments of our DNA matched across which chromosomes. It wasn't an error. The evidence was literally written in our genes. My wife and I were related. Distant cousins, but related nonetheless. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I didn't know how to feel. Should I be disgusted? Concerned? Was this even a big deal? My rational brain knew that second or third cousins sharing 3.7% of DNA was distant enough that it posed no real genetic risk. If we decided to have children, they would be perfectly healthy. But there was something unsettling about the discovery nonetheless, something that made me question everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, The connection I'd always felt with Elena. Had that inexplicable bond, that feeling of recognition I'd experienced when we first met, been some kind of subconscious genetic recognition? Were we drawn to each other because, on some level, we were family? Elena was already on her phone, Googling frantically. Second cousins share great grandparents, she read aloud. Third cousins share great great grandparents. So we would have the same great grandparents or great great grandparents. Her voice was clinical, detached, as if she were reading about strangers instead of us. But how? I asked. How could we not know this? Our families know each other. Someone would have mentioned it. That wasn't entirely true, though. Elena's parents had immigrated from Ukraine before she was born. My father's parents had come from Poland after World War II. Our families hadn't known each other before Elena and I met at a friend's housewarming party 5 years ago. There could easily be branches of our family trees that had lost touch over the generations, separated by wars, migrations, changing borders. We need to look at our family trees, Elena said decisively. Figure out where the connection is. But it wasn't that simple. My grandparents on my father's side had passed away years ago, and many of our family records had been lost during the war. Elena's family history was similarly fragmented, with relatives scattered across Eastern Europe, many lost to various conflicts and political upheavals. We spent the next few weeks piecing together what we could, reaching out to elderly relatives, scouring old photographs and documents. All the while, our discovery hung between us like an invisible barrier. We didn't tell anyone, not our friends, not our families. It felt too strange, too personal, but it affected us nonetheless. I found myself studying Elena's face, looking for physical similarities I might have missed before. Did we have the same nose, the same hairline? Were her expressions familiar because I'd seen them on distant relatives? More disturbingly, I found myself questioning our relationship. Had our connection always been familial rather than romantic? Was our marriage somehow tainted by this revelation? I knew these thoughts were irrational. Plenty of people historically married cousins, even first cousins, and 3.7% shared DNA was really quite distant. But I couldn't help the creeping discomfort, the way it made me second-guess moments of intimacy. Elena seemed to be going through her own process. She became obsessed with genealogy, spending hours on Ancestry websites, joining forums, ordering records from overseas. If we can just figure out exactly how we're related, she kept saying, maybe it will make this easier to understand. But understanding the exact nature of our relation didn't seem likely to resolve the emotional complexity of our situation. The truth was, nothing had actually changed. We were the same people with the same history together, the same love. And yet, everything felt different. I found myself withdrawing, spending more time at work, making excuses to avoid physical contact. Elena noticed. Of course she did. One night, about 3 weeks after our discovery, she confronted me. "Are you disgusted by me now?" she asked bluntly as I was getting ready for bed, her voice steady but her eyes revealing hurt. No, I said immediately, and it was true. I wasn't disgusted by her. I'm just processing. "We're distant cousins, not siblings," she said. "Second or third cousins marrying was completely normal throughout most of human history. It's still legal everywhere." "I know that," I replied. "Logically, I know that, but it still feels strange." "Because society has conditioned you to find it strange," she countered. "But there's nothing wrong with us. Nothing has changed." She was right, at least partly. Society had conditioned me to find the idea of marrying a relative, even a distant one, taboo. But my discomfort went beyond social conditioning. It felt more primal, more confusing. I had always believed our connection was special, unique. Now I wondered if it had been predetermined by our shared genetics all along. That night, lying beside Elena in bed, both of us awake but pretending not to be, I thought about family and fate and all the random chances that bring people together. If Elena's parents hadn't immigrated to America, if mine hadn't settled in the same city, if we hadn't both attended that particular housewarming party on that particular night, we never would have met, never would have fallen in love. Or perhaps we would have met differently at a family reunion, introduced as distant cousins, our connection taking a different form entirely. Was it really so strange that relatives, even distant ones, might be drawn to each other? We share habits, preferences, mannerisms, even ways of thinking. Maybe what I had interpreted as romantic compatibility was actually genetic familiarity? But did that make our love any less real? The next morning, I woke to find Elena already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, surrounded by papers. I think I found it, she said without preamble. She had been cross-referencing our family trees with historical records and DNA matches, and believed she had identified our common ancestors. My great-great-grandfather and Elena's great-great-grandmother had been siblings, born in a small village in what was now western Ukraine but had once been eastern Poland. The border had changed multiple times over the centuries, and families had often been separated by political divisions, wars, and migrations. So we're third cousins, she said, showing me the chart she'd created. We share great-great-grandparents. Seeing it laid out so concretely somehow made it more real. We weren't just abstract, distant cousins. We had specific shared ancestors, people who had lived and loved and produced the lineages that eventually led to us. Does this change how you feel? Elena asked, watching me closely. I considered the question seriously. Did knowing exactly how we were related change anything? Did it make the situation better or worse? The truth was, it didn't change the fundamental reality. We were both related and married, both family and lovers. I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm still trying to figure that out. Elena sighed, closing her laptop. I've been thinking about this constantly, she admitted. At first, I was just as shocked as you. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that this doesn't change who we are or what we mean to each other. If anything, it just explains why we've always felt so connected. There was that idea again, that our romantic connection might somehow be explained by our genetic connection. The thought still unsettled me, though I couldn't exactly explain why. I need some time, I told her. This is a lot to process. She nodded, understanding but clearly hurt. Take whatever time you need, but don't push me away. Over the next few days, I did a lot of research and a lot of thinking. I'd learned that marrying second cousins was still relatively common in many parts of the world, and third cousins even more so. I read scientific studies suggesting that cousins who marry have no significantly higher risk of genetic disorders in their children than unrelated couples. I even found articles arguing that a small degree of genetic similarity might actually enhance compatibility between partners. None of this completely resolved my discomfort, but it helped put things in perspective. Our situation wasn't as unusual or problematic as my initial reaction had suggested. I also spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship itself. Elena and I had always connected on multiple levels. Intellectually, emotionally, physically. We shared interests and values, challenged each other in positive ways, supported each other through difficulties. Yes, there had always been an inexplicable sense of recognition, of familiarity, but our relationship had been built on much more than that. One evening, about a week after Elena had identified our common ancestors, I came home to find her cooking dinner, music playing softly in the background. It was such a normal domestic scene, so familiar and comfortable. I watched her for a moment, moving around the kitchen with easy grace, humming along to the song. And suddenly, I felt a wave of clarity. This was my wife, the woman I had fallen in love with, built a life with, promised forever to. The fact that we shared a small percentage of DNA, that we had common ancestors many generations back, didn't change that fundamental truth. If anything, it was just another thread in the complex tapestry of our relationship. I love you, I said, the words coming out before I'd fully formed the thought. Elena turned, surprise and hope mingling in her expression. I love you too. I'm sorry I've been distant, I continued, moving closer to her. I needed to work through this to understand what it means for us. And what does it mean? She asked, her voice cautious. It means we have a unique connection, I said slowly, trying to articulate the conclusion I'd come to. One that maybe has multiple dimensions. Yes, we're distantly related, but we're also partners, lovers, best friends. Our DNA might explain a small part of why we've always felt so connected, but it doesn't define our relationship. The tension visibly drained from Elena's shoulders. That's what I've been trying to say. I know, I'm sorry it took me longer to get there. She put down the spoon she'd been holding and wrapped her arms around me. Does this mean you're not freaked out anymore? I wouldn't go that far, I admitted with a small laugh. It's still a lot to process, but I'm not going to let it come between us. This is just another part of our story now. That night, for the first time since our discovery, we made love. There was a new awareness between us, a knowledge that couldn't be unknown, but it didn't diminish our connection. If anything, there was a heightened intimacy in the acceptance of our complete truth. In the weeks and months that followed, we gradually found a new normal. We decided not to share our discovery with family or friends, not out of shame, but because it felt like a private matter, something that belonged to just us. Elena continued her genealogical research, now less frantically and more out of genuine interest in our shared heritage. We had many discussions about what this meant for our future plans, particularly regarding children. We consulted with a genetic counselor who assured us that the 3.7% DNA we shared posed virtually no increased risk for offspring. This was reassuring, though we were still some years away from making that decision. The most unexpected outcome of our discovery was how it ultimately deepened our relationship. Having faced this surprising revelation together, having worked through the complex emotions it evoked, we emerged with a stronger understanding of each other and of our commitment. We had seen each other at our most vulnerable, most confused, and had chosen to stay, to work through it, to love despite, or perhaps even including, the complications. Now, nearly a year after that fateful DNA test result, I can say that while the discovery changed us, it didn't diminish us. Elena and I are still the same couple who fell in love at a housewarming party, who built a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. We're still planning our future, dreaming together, supporting each other through life's challenges. But we also carry this unique understanding of our connection, one that spans generations, that has roots in shared ancestry and branches in chosen love. It's not always easy to hold these two truths simultaneously, to be both family and lovers, but it has taught us something valuable about the complexity of human relationships. Sometimes I wonder about those ancestors of ours, the siblings born in that small Eastern European village, who never could have imagined that their descendants would one day meet and marry in America. I wonder what they would think of our situation, whether they would find it strange or somehow fitting that their bloodlines, separated by time and distance, eventually found their way back to each other. I don't believe in fate or destiny in any mystical sense. I don't think Elena and I were meant to be because of our distant shared ancestry. But I do believe that the connections between people, whether through blood or choice or some combination of both, are more complex and multifaceted than we often acknowledge. Elena and I are related. Elena and I are married. Both these things are true, and while that once seemed impossible to reconcile, I've come to see them as simply different dimensions of the same reality. The reality that human connection doesn't always fit into neat, separate categories. If I could go back to that moment when I first saw Elena's name on my DNA relatives list, would I choose not to know? Would I close the laptop, delete the email, preserve the uncomplicated narrative of our relationship? It's tempting to think so, given the emotional turbulence that followed, but the truth is, I wouldn't change it. Knowledge, even uncomfortable knowledge, is valuable. Understanding the full complexity of our connection hasn't weakened our relationship, it's enriched it. We see each other more completely now with a deeper appreciation for all the threads, genetic, emotional, chosen, and circumstantial, that have woven us together. Every relationship contains mysteries, elements that can't be fully explained or understood. Elena and I started with what seemed like an extraordinary connection, one that felt somehow predestined despite my skepticism about such concepts. Now we have one possible explanation for that feeling, but it doesn't diminish the wonder of what we've built together. We are distant cousins who became husband and wife. We are relatives who fell in love without knowing our connection. We are partners navigating a relationship that doesn't fit neatly into conventional categories. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the most meaningful connections are precisely those that challenge our assumptions, that exist in the complex spaces between established categories, that require us to expand our understanding of how people can be bound to one another. Elena and I are still writing our story, still discovering what it means to be both family and partners. It's not always a straightforward journey, but it's uniquely ours with all its complexities and contradictions. And in a world where so many relationships fail despite seeming perfect on paper, there's something to be said for a bond that survives even the most unexpected revelations. So, yes, I've been happily married for 3 years now, and my wife and I are distant cousins. Both these things are true, and somehow, improbably, we're making it work. Not despite our connection, but because of all the many dimensions it contains.